Shaq Barrett doesn't care about rings or money. He just loves Tampa. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome into this live episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. No ads or hashtags or anything like that. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. The Good Morning Football crew reacts to Jason Licht's comments about Baker Mayfield, and an always fun annual article drops that tells us exactly why the Buccaneers are going to be terrible. That's all coming up in a little bit. But let's start with former Buccaneers outside linebacker Shaq Barrett and the things he said on Kay Adams' show on Thursday. So Shaq was a guest on Up and Adams, and to Kay's credit, she kept digging and digging until she got exactly what she wanted. Shaq made a seemingly innocent comment about the perfect scenario that would open the door for him to return to football and abandon his retirement. Kay kept pressing and persisting, and Shaq finally said, quote, "It's a location and a team. It ain't got nothing to do with winning a Super Bowl. It's just one team that I'd come out of retirement for. That's it," end quote. Kay was not satisfied with that answer, so she kept digging and digging. She was bouncing up and down in her seat, getting all excited, and Shaq said, quote, "It's a geographic location that I might have a home at or had a home at." And then Kay was all over it, saying the Buccaneers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you're not going back to Denver. You're returning to the Bucs. Shaq quickly shut that down, saying, "I'm not returning anywhere. I'm happily retired. But if something were to happen, yeah." He then elaborated, saying, quote, "I got a lot of history down there and all that stuff that went down with my daughter and how they came through for the family. I had like 2 years left on my contract. I told my wife, Tampa, I'd do anything for. I'd take pay cuts for Tampa. The way they showed up for my family and stuff like that, it just meant so much to me. Tampa, they have a special place in my heart." Well, Shaq, one-time guest of the Locked On Bucs podcast, you have a special place in the hearts of a lot of people in the city of Tampa and a lot of Buccaneers fans across the country. All that said, would the Buccaneers bring back Shaq Barrett? I hate to be the party pooper, but it seems extremely unlikely. I'm not saying it's impossible or that it'll never happen, but to me, it just seems very, very unlikely. The Bucs moved on from Barrett in large part because the money and the production were no longer in tandem with one another. Shaq obviously said that he would take a pay cut. He doesn't care about the money, but the Bucs seem content with their young group of up-and-coming edge rushers. Barrett only had 4.5 sacks last season and 3 sacks in 2022, though, to be fair to him, in 2022, he only played in 8 games. His tackles for loss have dropped each of the last 4 years. He has 2 seasons with double-digit sacks since 2019. He just isn't the player he was as recently as 2021. That doesn't mean that he couldn't provide value to the Buccaneers as a rotational player if all of a sudden they were decimated by injury. But what kind of shape is Shaq in? Is he still working out and training to stay in shape? And even if he is, it would still take a few weeks to get himself into football shape, which is very different from just being an in-shape person. So you're going to lose even more time there if he does return. it really is a lot of fun to think about Shaq returning, being a leader among all of those young players, mentoring Chris Braswell and Marquise Watts and Jose Ramirez, that he could provide a threat on passing downs opposite of Yaya Diaby. But in reality, I don't see it happening. If money wasn't an issue and he was willing to take a pay cut, did the Buccaneers know that? Was that an offer on the table and the Buccaneers still decided to move on? I talked yesterday about how the Bucs have become one of the youngest teams in the NFL, and I believe that the thought process for the coaches and for Jason Licht is that it's time to give those young guys a chance, good or bad. They have to be thrown in the deep end to see if they sink or if they swim. Otherwise, there's no true way to evaluate their status, their talent, their growth, and whether or not the Bucs have a solid group of edge rushers, or if that's a position that is going to take top priority in free agency and the draft, the way we saw with the interior of the offensive line this last offseason. If Shaq does return, you all know that I'm going to be hyped. I'm going to be excited about it. I know most of you are going to be right alongside with me with your excitement, but I'm not going to come on here and give you false hope that just because he said those things on Up and Adams that the Bucs are definitely going to be giving him or his agent a call and asking him to return. I think it would take a string of injuries before that call happens. Time will tell, but for now, I would temper any expectations or excitement for a potential reunion. Going to jump into the live chat real quick. And David in the chat says, Shaq waiting for a playoff run with the Bucs, with the little, thinking emoji there. Cody in the chat says, did I actually make a live? Let's go. Indeed you did, Cody. Welcome in. Glad you're here. Marcel says, waiting for you, Shaq. Les Evans says, let's put this to rest. Shaq is not coming back for the grind of the regular season. It's possible he might come back for a playoff run. That's the question. Yeah, I mean, that's very possible. I don't know if Shaq wants to go through all the trials and tribulations of a regular season, especially given the fact that he has been dinged up and injured the last couple of years. He missed more than half the season just 2 years ago. He missed a game last year. He's not a spring chicken. He's up there in age. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that if the Bucs look like they could make a late season push to contend for the division, or if it looks like they have the division wrapped up, but then they want a guy to come in with some fresh legs and be a pass rush threat in the postseason, it's possible they call him up. But as I said, I don't see this being a likely scenario, and certainly not for the regular season. I guess it's more possible that it's a late season kind of thing than it is something that's going to happen in September or October. And again, I think really what would play into it is how healthy are the edge rushers. Yaya Diaby suffered an injury last year, suffered an injury in training camp. You have Chris Braswell as a young guy. You have Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who has not lived up to the hype. You have Marquise Watts and Jose Ramirez. Both of those guys dealt with injuries last year. So these are all things to take into consideration. I would be pleasantly surprised if Shaq Barrett ends up on the roster at some point this season. Narav in the chat says, I might be the only one of team let Shaq stay retired. I wouldn't say that I'm not on that team. Shaq had one of the greatest defensive seasons we've ever seen from a Buccaneer. He holds the single season sack record. He is a huge reason that the Buccaneers won a Super Bowl just a few years ago. But you know what? He talked about how he was at peace with that decision. He went to the Miami Dolphins, worked with them in some of their offseason activities, decided to walk away from the game. And I think he's at peace with that. I think his family is at peace with that. I also think that they would support if he wanted to make a return. But ultimately, it plays into what I mentioned earlier. Is he in shape? How long is it going to take him to get into football shape? Do the Buccaneers truly have a need? Does he truly have a desire? I think once you make that decision to walk away from the game, it's hard to get yourself revved back up to return. We kind of saw that with Tom Brady when he retired, then came out of retirement and returned to the team. He wasn't the same Brady. There were a lot of off-field issues going on, but he wasn't the same guy. We've seen it with Brett Favre. We've seen it with these guys that kind of wax and waffle and can't make a decision, and then they decide to come back, and they aren't quite the same player. Kay's old show, Good Morning Football, reacts to something Jason Licht had to say. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, you all know I have a crazy schedule. I'm up at 3:30 in the morning. I'm racing around the entire Eastern time zone for my son's hockey commitments. There's always something going on, and that's why when I get to work, I'm taking a 5-hour energy to get my day started off right. I love the fact that it's sugar-free, and I can just throw one in my pocket before I walk out the door. I'm a huge fan of the berry flavor. That's my go-to, but it also comes in tropical burst grape and a delicious watermelon. So there is a flavor for everyone. You know, you can find them at the cash register at nearly every convenience, grocery, and drugstore across the nation. And if you go to 5hourenergy.com, you can build your own 12 or 24 pack so you get the perfect mix of all the flavors that you love. Go to 5hourenergy.com. That's the number 5hourenergy.com and get some 5-Hour Energy product today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONFB. That's LOCKEDONFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Good Morning Football isn't quite what it used to be, at least not in my opinion, but it's still an entertaining and informative watch, even with the new crew. That crew, which does still include Peter Schrager and Kyle Brandt, had a few things to say regarding a comment made on Wednesday by Jason Licht about his quarterback, Baker Mayfield. And for context, Jason Licht said, quote, he was very focused last year. There's just a little bit different gleam in his eye. And I think a little bit maybe has to do with the fact that he's a father now. Once again, this is not saying he wasn't mature, but he just seems to have a little bit more to prove, which I'd love to see. I love when people say things about him and doubt him. It energizes this entire team, end quote. Kyle Brandt reacted to that, kicking things off by saying, quote, I love him. I think it's important to remember that a year ago, Baker Mayfield shows up to Tampa and his stock had never been lower. I will say this about Baker. I've always been a big fan, but he's never put together two great seasons. Great in Cleveland, gets injured, then bounces around. This would be the time to do it. I hate to be a cynic about all this, and it's cute to talk about babies and diapers, and maybe he has a gleam in his eye because Jason Licht gave him a 9-figure deal this offseason. That would give me a gleam, but I think Baker needs to put together this season big time because the South is anybody's to win, and he has yet to do it back-to-back years, and he knows it, end quote. Tom Pelissero, who was on Good Morning Football, chimed in and said, quote, this is the first time in a while I can remember where you actually feel like there's a team to beat, and it's not the team that's won the division the past few years in Tampa Bay. It's Atlanta. How much have you guys on this show, us on the Insiders, talked about the Falcons compared to every other team in that division throughout the offseason because they signed Kirk Cousins? Then they draft Michael Penix Jr. Then they're signing Justin Simmons and trading for Matthew Judon. It's all this hype, but Tampa's the team that's been there year after year. This is not just about Baker. Hey, you got paid. Now let's go defend that title. No, this is a Tampa team that seems like a lot of people are doubting whether or not they're actually going to be for real, end quote. This is exactly what I was referencing on yesterday's show when I talked about Jason Light's comment saying that people should be picking the Falcons to win. And I'm not going to be hard on Kyle or Tom because we know that they're not actively going out there to pick Atlanta just to root against Tampa. We know Kyle is one of the biggest Baker backers in the media, and he loves the Bucs. He loves rocking the creamsicle orange on the show. And it seems like he's sending the angry run scepter to Tampa at least a few times every year. But this is the narrative. The division is boring. The Bucs aren't exciting without Tom Brady. The Falcons made all the splashy moves and the controversial draft pick, and they stay in the spotlight, so they become the team that everyone wants to talk about. For what it's worth, I do agree that becoming a parent changes your mindset. It changes your work ethic, your day-to-day routine, your priorities. It truly changes everything about who you are as a person. With that said, I don't think that becoming a father is what will help Baker Mayfield be a better quarterback. It doesn't work that way. Now, the drive and the work ethic may come from his new lot in life, but that's what will make him better is the work, not just simply being a new dad. The better offensive line, more weapons, better play calling, all of those things will contribute to making Baker better than he was last year. Just because he became a dad doesn't all of a sudden mean he's going to transform into prime Peyton Manning. But it's about the newly found focus and drive and what he does with that, where you're going to see actual change happen. At this stage, everything that can be said about Baker has been said, and Kyle isn't wrong in his assessment. He really hasn't put together back-to-back great seasons. He did get hurt in Cleveland after an incredible playoff run. Then he goes to the fiery dumpster inferno that was Carolina. He goes to a losing situation with the Rams mid-season. So this year would be the first time. And the question is, will he rise to the occasion or will he press too hard to try to make too many things happen and instead end up making a lot of mistakes? I firmly believe that it's the former, but it's on Baker to show that not putting together those back-to-back great seasons was more out of his control than most people want to admit. The Bucs have given him everything that he could ask for: money, trust, belief, protection, a plethora of weapons. It's now on Baker's shoulders to make the most of it. Going to jump into the live chat before we move on. We got Destined for Greatness coming in, talking about Shaq Barrett, who we covered in the first segment for those just joining the live. Destin says, Shaq said it himself. He doesn't think it will happen. Doesn't mean we don't want it. Very fair. Absolutely 100% fair. We got Bry Gage. Sorry, my eyes are bad in the chat. So it's one thing to want it. It's another that people genuinely believe it's going to happen. Finally settled down with the annoying fans begging for Reddick and Gilmore. Now they're going to cry about Shaq. I don't know if anybody's going to be out there actually crying about Shaq or really, pounding the table or pining for Shaq. It's fun to think about. It's exciting to think about. He's going to forever be a fan favorite in the city of Tampa for all the things that he did, for all he did within the community, for how much his family was loved by the fan base, by the organization. But I haven't really seen people like really pounding the table for Shaq to return. But it is worth noting. It is worth talking about. It is worth discussing the scenarios in which it could become a reality. I don't think that one of those scenarios is just because he said on a show that the Bucs are the one team that he would come out of retirement for. We got David in the chat saying, I like our improved O-line and run game to help improve Baker's confidence 100%. And we know how good Baker Mayfield is off the play action. If if that offensive line and that run game get going and teams have to respect it more than they did last year, regardless of the running back on the field, Baker is going to be all the more dangerous coming off of the play action. Sam in the chat, why are so many people so big on Kirk Cousins? He's a mediocre quarterback who doesn't have the best wide receiver in the league to throw to anymore. Baker is a much better QB with a much better team around him. I think it's because Kirk Cousins, if nothing else, has been consistent. He is consistently putting up really, really great numbers. He did it with Washington. He did it again with Minnesota. But to your point, he doesn't have Stephon Diggs in his prime anymore. He doesn't have Dalvin Cook anymore. He doesn't have Justin Jefferson. Now he does have Bijan Robinson, who could be one of, if not the best in the running back in the NFL in 2024. But Drake London is not Justin Jefferson or Stephon Diggs. He's good. He's not that good. So I think it's the hype around the change of scenery. But again, 36-year-old quarterback coming off of a ruptured Achilles. I'm going to wait and reserve judgment for what I think Kirk Cousins will be in 2024. An always fun annual series tells us why everything we think we know about the Buccaneers is wrong. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, brakes, rotors, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Wrapping things up here on a live edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And I came across this today and I had to talk about it. And I had to talk about it because it is so much fun and it is hilarious. There is a website by the name of defector.com that every year posts a column about why your favorite team sucks. That's literally the name of the series, Why Your Team Sucks. Tom Lee dropped the one about the Buccaneers and had some absolute gems. So the article starts with a disclaimer saying, quote, some people are fans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but many, many more people are not fans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This 2024 Defector NFL team preview is for those in the latter group. So Tom starts by ripping the Buccaneers' record last year by asking if any team has ever collected as many unearned and unwanted wins as the 2023 Bucs, pointing out that the plan was to spend the first post-Brady season getting through all the dead cap money and win the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. He then references Baker as being a guy too pitiful for the Browns and then says that Bowles has the charisma of an IRS auditor. It goes on and on like that, saying Light was bamboozled by Todd Bowles' success because the NFC South is, quote, the NFL's version of a hospice wing, and that it would have taken far more effort from the Buccaneers for them to actually lose. Lay goes on breaking down the coach, the quarterback, and then gets into a section called What's New That Sucks, where he calls Liam Cohen a doofy-looking white guy in his 30s that coached under McVay, and then warns Todd Bowles that he should turn down any offers to go boating with Cohen as his life is very obviously in danger. He points out that what has always sucked is being a tacky two-bit organization, removing all the fun from the game of football, everything from their hideous uniforms, while fans suffer from heat stroke in a bad stadium. Lee also drops some fan quotes who bash everything from Baker to how the Bucs have no fans within their own home state to all of the failed team slogans over the years, most notably Siege the Day. To be fair, Vita does point out what might not suck. And he lists off Vita Vea, Antoine Winfield, and Levante David being the absolute superstars that they are on the defense, along with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin being one of the best wide receiver duos in all of football. I have to say that I highly, highly recommend that you check out this column. Lay does an absolutely outstanding job of being a sarcastic Buccaneers hater and dropping all kinds of absolutely phenomenal one-liners about the Buccaneers. And they do it for every team. So this isn't a situation where Lee just hates the Buccaneers and wants to rip them to shreds to bring himself some sort of personal enjoyment. You read it, you give yourself a nice laugh, then you can go on to read about why other teams in the NFL are going to suck. You can read about the Panthers and the Saints and the Falcons because, of course, you're going to enjoy all the reasons that are pointed out why they're going to be terrible. But you can read it about the Chiefs, about the 49ers, about the Ravens or the Bengals or the Bears, all these teams getting all of the hype all offseason long that are talked about as Super Bowl contenders. They have one about every team. It's an amazing, amazing series. And we all love football. We all want to see the Buccaneers succeed. I've spoken a lot about the disrespect that the Buccaneers have gotten throughout the offseason. Lots of messages from the Locked On Bucs insiders talking about how the Bucs don't get any respect. Lots of you in the live chat, comments on social media. Why are the Bucs overlooked? Why are they ignored? They're going to be great. They're going to be a playoff contender. They're going to win the division again. But at the end of the day, when something like this rolls around, it's fun for us to remove emotion entirely. Take a step back and just laugh at the satire and the fun, which is exactly what the column is intended to do. So again, please go to defector.com, check out the Why Your Team Sucks series, laugh at some of the things that Lee says about the Buccaneers, because even though I disagree with a lot of it, it's said in jest, it's said in fun, and he does such a wonderful job of presenting it that I recommend every Buccaneers fan check it out and enjoy it. And then, like I said, you can check out why other teams are going to suck and really have a great time with all of it. Going to jump into the live chat one more time before we get out of here. We got BB King in the chat. What happens if Irving looks better than White in the first part of the season? Stick to the plan. Stick to the plan. Rashad is your RB1. Irving is the guy that you bring in relief. Sean Tucker is the guy that you bring in after Bucky Irving. You could see a couple of games here and there where Bucky might be performing better or look better than Rashad White. Rashad is going to be talked about as one of the top 10 running backs in the NFL this season. When all is said and done, when all the smoke clears, when we're rolling back around to free agency and in the NFL draft, we're going to be talking about how the Bucs need to lock up Rashad White as he enters a contract year because he is one of the best and most versatile running backs in the NFL. I don't think there's going to be a running back controversy in Tampa. Bry, referencing the series that I just talked about, says this must be where Saints fans get their news. I love it. I love it. BB King says Bowles is funnier than an IRS auditor. Les in the chat says, wow, big time hater. No, not a hater at all. It's all in fun. If you missed the disclaimer, Les, at the beginning of that segment, they do it for every single team. They have fun with it. It really is just a lot of laughs. And if you can't laugh at the team that you love and the team that you follow, then what are we really even doing here? All right. Destined for greatness. 1 week away from a Yarcho Harrison crossover. Let's go. That's right. In fact, less than a week. Crossover Thursday begins next week when David and I are reunited because this is the last weekend without NFL football. Amazing. We do have college football. My beloved Illini, they got their first win of the season on Thursday night. We have college football, but this is it. The last weekend of 2024 without NFL football. What are you going to do to pass your time? I'm going to tell you what to do. Keep your eye out on Twitter for a major announcement coming. If you're a Locked On Bucs insider, you're going to get the announcement probably before it's seen on social media, but keep an eye out for a big time announcement. Very, very excited about it. But that is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. Please make sure you are following on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @Yarcho_Bucs. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on, or on your favorite podcast platform of choice. Become a Locked On Bucs insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.